Federalist 46, Part 2. We'll start with paragraph 4. Again, from the first part, Madison challenges and rejects those people who say people are going to get closer to the federal government than the state government, or the federal government is going to crush them and take their liberties away. He actually comes in this paper and says directly that if federal government oversteps its boundary in a way that people feel like their freedom is going to be threatened, people can rise up, they're already armed, rise up, get organized, and fight it. Just like we fought the British, people can fight the federal government. And he constantly says people's attachments are going to be towards their states, not towards the federal government. Okay, let's continue. If therefore, as has been elsewhere remarked, the people should in future become more partial to the federal than the state governments, the change can only result from such manifest and irresistible proofs of a better administration as will come all their antecedent propensities. And in that case, the people ought not surely to be precluded from giving most of their confidence where they may discover it to be most due. But even in that case, the state governments could have little to apprehend, because it is only within a certain sphere that the federal power can, in the nature of things, be advantageously administered. So here is the only paragraph that he says, well, if people become closer to the federal government, it's probably because the state government has been miserable, has not been able to do its job. And the federal government has shown that they are more energetic, they do everything right, and that's the only time that people will have a stronger attachment to the federal government. But he says we know this is not going to happen that often. Usually during the war is when people's life is under threat. They look at the central government for defending them. Otherwise, it's all the attachments are to the state. Then paragraph 5 is short. The remaining points on which I propose to compare the federal and state governments are the disposition and the faculty they may respectively possess to resist and frustrate the measures of each other. So here he's going to talk a lot about the state and the federal governments and how they can stop the other side from going too far. It has been already proved that the members of the federal will be more dependent on the members of the state governments than the latter will be on the former. Remember in the last paper we said members of the federal government, senators, president, even House of Representatives, they'll be either directly or indirectly elected by the state legislatures. Even in the House of Representatives, he said in Federalist 45 that even though those members are directly elected by the people in large, but he says if the state legislature finds a candidate not worthy, then they will push that candidate aside. So see, even there, the state is so powerful. It has appeared also that the prepossessions of the people on whom both will depend will be more on the side of the state governments than of the federal government. So far as the disposition of each towards the other may be influenced by these causes, the state governments must clearly have the advantage. But in a distinct and very important point of view, the advantage will lie on the same side. The prepossessions which the members themselves will carry into the federal government will generally be favorable to the states, whilst it will rarely happen that the members of the state governments will carry into the public councils a bias in favor of the general government. A local spirit will infallibly prevail much more in the members of Congress than a national spirit will prevail in the legislatures of the particular states. In other words, again, those representatives you send to the federal government, they're going to be actually looking at that for the interests of the states first than the whole union. He says this has generally been the case. But at the state level, it's obvious that they'll definitely be looking after the interests of the state. So he's going through different scenarios. In every way, he says the advantage, the loyalty would be tilted towards the state governments. Everyone knows that a great proportion of errors committed by the state legislatures proceed from the disposition of the members to sacrifice the comprehensive and permanent interest of the state to the particular and separate views of the counties or districts in which they reside. See, even here, honestly, he says even those who are in the state legislature, the first interest is to look after the interest of the counties they were elected in. So even there, they have local allegiances. They'll be focusing more in the smaller part of the state where they come from. So don't worry about sending representatives or senators to the Congress of the United States, to the federal government, and think that they'll forget about you. They won't. And if they do not sufficiently enlarge their policy to embrace the collective welfare of their particular state, how can it be imagined that they will make the aggregate prosperity of the Union and the dignity and respectability of its government the object of their affections and consultations? For the same reason that the members of the state legislatures will be unlikely to attach themselves sufficiently to national objects, the members of the federal legislature will be likely to attach themselves too much to local objects. The states will be to the latter what counties and towns are to the former. Measures will too often be decided according to their probable effect, not on the national prosperity and happiness, but on the prejudices, interests, and pursuits of the government and the people of individual states. What is the spirit that has in general characterized the proceedings of Congress? A perusal of their journals, looking at their daily activities inside the Congress, he says, as well as the candid acknowledgments of such as have had a seat in that assembly, will inform us that the members have but too frequently displayed the character rather of partisans of their respective states than of impartial guardians of a common interest meaning national interest. That where on one occasion improper sacrifices have been made of local considerations to the aggrandizement of the federal government, the great interests of the nation have suffered on 100 from an undue attention to the local prejudices, interests, and views of the particular state. It is only 1 in 100 times there have been maybe cases that they have put the national interest before their state interests. I mean not by these reflections to insinuate that the new federal government will not embrace a more enlarged plan of policy than the existing government may have pursued. much less that its views will be as confined as those of the state legislatures, but only that it will partake sufficiently of the spirit of both to be disinclined to invade the rights of the individual states or the prerogatives of their governments. The motives on the part of the state governments to augment their prerogatives by defalcation from the federal government will be overruled by no reciprocal predispositions in the members. We will stop here and I'll continue in the next video.